he goes, put Matt on the air, man. What are you doing? And so did the producer, Rick Hankey. And then they had artists. And I think it was kind of Lauren Levine, I think the British woman who I love. But at the time, they didn't think the world was ready for a short, bald guy. You know what I mean? And knows a lot about music.
I'm still not sure.
Yeah,
the world
I'm still not
ready for it.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yes.
Benstown president Dave Chachi Dennis loves radio and all of his radio friends.
Hey, Chachi.
Hey, everybody.
Because Chachi loves everybody.
Matt Pinfield, who I get to see almost every week come down the halls of Benstown because he records here with Kevin, who's the producer of Chachi Loves Everybody, is also the producer of a much bigger and more successful show called Flashback that Matt is the host of.
You know, it's amazing. We're hitting our 9th year, Chachi, which is in January.
Has it really been that long?
9 years, which is great.
That really is great. And I met you then 9 years ago. If you would have asked me, I thought maybe it's been like 5.
Yeah,
I never thought it was.
It's 9 the last week of January, which is great.
Jeez. Well, let's get into we have an icebreaker, and we ask everyone what their favorite drink is.
Well,
and
yeah.
So what do we have here that you are? It's a very large, tall Starbucks.
Well, you know, I brought it because I was recording some other radio stuff earlier today. It's I got the big. What is it called? The Trenta or whatever. It's the biggest thing, but it's unsweetened green tea lemonade, iced, because I love iced drinks. I mean, even coffee. When it's 0-degree weather, when I used to be doing my morning show in New York City, I would get up, I'd get out of the PATH train down by the World Trade Center before I jumped in a cab to go up to RXP, where Hot 97 is and everywhere right there, the MS stations. And I literally would go to either Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts and get black iced tea, not black coffee, actually, in 0-degree weather.
0
degree,
degree,
crazy.
You still loved it. I love ice drinks too, and that's I think an American thing largely. You go to Europe and they're actually like, "Why do you want ice in your?" What do you want
ice? And if you put ice in it, it's like 2 ice cubes, and it just seems like it's been sitting around for 4 days.
I love ice. So, you developed the taste iced tea as a kid, growing up, or
green tea I discovered obviously from going to Asian restaurants, and when they made it available with lemonade, I just said, "Give it a try one day." It was a hybrid thing they did,
and that's your thing.
That or coffee. That or iced black coffee.
So isn't lemonade iced tea? That's an Arnold Palmer, right?
Yeah, it is. It is, but it's usually black tea. So this is I guess a different shade of Arnold Palmer, which is what I order at restaurants.
A Matt Pinfield.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, so Chachi, man, it's great to be here with you today, brother.
It's great to be here with you. I'm going to dive right in. I mean, your career has just been amazing and an incredible story. So tell me about being a kid.
You know, as a kid, I loved radio. I mean, I discovered music when I was, very young. Like 3 years old. My dad was a school teacher. My mom was a stay-at-home mom with 3 kids. Eventually went back to, doing secretary work over at Rutgers University, but so that I would get a break on my college, tuition.
We're going to get there. I'm excited.
But that kind of break was like basically all your college tuition, which was a cool thing. But so I was at 3 years old. My parents bought a used record player with a bunch of 45s, and then my brother and sister would go out and get 45s. So at the time I was 3, I was listening to the Beatles and the Stones and Motown, and I loved all that stuff.
Your dad did he like music? A big music fan?
He liked music. He even performed with that guy Frankie Lane when he was in the Marines, but it was he wasn't really into any kind of rock and roll thing. I mean, he discovered that through his children.
Okay.
Because it was still that period with, there was more of a generation gap in those periods of the 1960s. You know what I mean? Your parents like different music, basically.
So you're rocking out, and your dad doesn't quite understand.
He was supportive always, whether he understood what I was doing or not. But he was always incredibly supportive. He built my first stereo by hand with the transistors, with the knobs, and shellacked the wood himself. My first stereo he built.
Do you have a picture of that by any chance?
No. In fact, I'm very upset. When you're young, you're like, whatever. I want to get a new techniques, and then boy, do I wish I had that now.
I'm sure.
My father passed in 2008. I mean, he also did something really great for me. I wanted to be a disc jockey and wanted to be on the radio from the time I was a very young boy. Since I was 5, I was glued to a transistor radio or a radio in the house listening to WABC, the top 40 station in New York City, because I was in central New Jersey, which is great because years later, I got to, meet, cousin Brucie, and he would say, I really love your voice. You should do some promos for, and I went, Brucie, that's crazy because I've been listening to you since I was 5, over at Sirius XM one time. But, Yeah, so I loved radio so much, and I loved music. So that was really what I wanted. When I wasn't out playing with the other kids, I wanted to be in front of a record player. And I also wanted to be a disc jockey. So one of the cool things my dad did, because he was a physics teacher, he was very smart.
So that's how he had the brains to build a radio.
Yeah,
that's impressive.
That's what he did. So he was also the head of the audiovisual department at East Brunswick High School in New Jersey.
Okay.
So he ended up, he had this catalog that had a way to build a cheap AM transmitter.
Right.
That broadcast about a block. So, he ordered the parts. We had like a beat up Radio Shack, two beat up turntables, a cheap Radio Shack mixer, a couple microphones. Way. And me and my friends went on rainy days would do radio shows. I'd give them fake names, because everybody had was a cousin Brucie or somebody else.
Yeah.
We'd listen to Dan Ingram or all these other guys in New York City. And basically we would do radio shows. And then one guy, isn't it funny? One guy would run down the street and see how far. And we thought we were so cool because we're all the way up at the top of the dial, 16 plus. And, it only went like a block, but we were still on the radio.
You had your own little pirate radio station.
Yeah, it was our own little pirate station. It was really fun.
What a blast. Now, any of your friends that you were doing this with, did they go on to be in radio as well? Or
no, they didn't, but I'm still friends with a lot of those guys, and most people never forget it because it was just a cool kind of a unique thing that your friend and your neighbor was doing. Sure.
Your siblings, were they into radio at all?
Well, they loved listening to it, obviously. It's interesting because, they listened to Top 40 when they were kids. And then, I remember my brother in 1970, before they had FM radios in most cars, he had one of those transformers. It was that you put in your glove compartment. And then you'd go all the way down to 88.3.
Okay.
On the FM dial, and then you'd listen to WNEW FM, in New York City.
Oh, I'd never even heard of that before.
Yeah. They had those. Isn't that wild? So that was, and you'd listen to it through a mono AM speaker, but it would be the FM station. So that's when Freeform FM was.
No kidding.
An album rock radio back in 1970. I remember him having it in his car and hearing "Wild World" by Cat Stevens, and he didn't want to get out of the car. He goes, "You got to hear this song." And it was great,
Was your dad, he obviously got to see you succeed, go to MTV. And
he did,
VH1 and so forth.
He was very sick. My dad, he was all kind of a rough card, when he was younger. He had his first heart attack when he was 25, and he was a Marine officer. He fought in Korea as a Marine, came back, was promoted, went to OCS school, and then what happened was he had a heart attack so young that he got an honorable discharge, went back to college at the University of Georgia and studied physics. I was born in Athens, Georgia because of that. I was born down there while he was, and my sister was also born in Georgia. My brother was born before that in New Jersey. So, yeah, it's he had to start his whole career over.
Amazing.
And because he had 3 kids, they were like, well, you should be a major physicist. You're so brilliant. But he decided to teach because he had a family to take care of. And but he was amazing, and he did a lot of really great creative things and was very, very helpful. Even if he didn't if he didn't understand the music, he still knew my love for radio and just was supportive.
I find it so interesting, and I'd love to have you take a test on your intelligence, but I think you're highly, highly intelligent, and just what you know about music and your understanding of the entire business is incredible to me. And that's something I want to get into a little bit deeper here in a second, but because you brought up your father and being studious and obviously very intelligent, I can see where you got it from.
Yeah. Well, he and my mom, my mom's 87 and she's as sharp as a tack.
Is she?
She's a 4'11" little Irish woman from Jersey. And man, she's very bright as well. Her brother was a big CIA operative because he was so bright, they came in and recruited him out of high school. Wow. So both sides of the family, they're very smart.
Both supported you going after. Tell me about Rutgers. Obviously, you said your mother worked there.
My mother was, in order to help me out to go through school, she went to work there at Rutgers, which was, obviously took care of the tuition. But when I was 16, I wanted to be on the radio. And, when you're that close to major markets, Philly and New York, and there aren't a lot of stations in between in a small state like New Jersey. And if they were more like beautiful music and, super mellow or a big band or something like that. I wanted to be on the radio so badly that, when I was 16, they had pledge drives at Rutgers University radio station, WRSU. And my friends in school and high school with me, they threw me like a 5-week pledge so I could go on for 2 hours. And when I did, I planned out the show. The chief announcer there and the program director were going, man, you are really good. You really, so I tried to get on that summer, but I wasn't in school yet. So about a year and a half later, I was able to go on, when I went to school. But it was, and then I was there on WRSU, the Rutgers station, for years.
You became the music director there too, correct?
For music director and promotion director for a certain period of time.
I mean, how did that feel when you finally got that was your first real big chance on the air?
It was fantastic. I mean, I loved it. I love radio so much. Radio has always been such a big part of my life. I mean, when I was just over in Brazil, we're kind of rocking Rio. You know what I was listening to? Because the TV stations were all in Portuguese, like all the stuff. There might be one, and I got tired of looking at all the impeached Trump stuff. It's like, it's one story that runs a whole day.
Yeah,
it gets really boring. Not to say, I mean, I worked every day I was there, except for a couple of days we did tourist things. But you know what I would do at night? I would go on Mixcloud or iHeart and listen to Casey Kasem's countdowns from the 1970s and the early 80s.
No way.
Yeah, I love to listen to that stuff. I love radio. I love those places where you can find old air checks. Like there's a WRSU, not RSU, ABC in New York City has a website called a tribute website called musicradio77.com. And there's air checks from all those years of the 60s and early 70s.
Great.
And man, I go on there. I love to listen to that stuff. Every couple of years I'll go back and go through those, but it's fascinating to me because
did you keep any of your old air checks?
Other people have them and have posted them on Facebook and
we should put some
Twitter.
In the show notes if we can. I'd love to put some of them up there.
There's some there's some that are really cool. It's really funny.
I digitized all of mine a few years back and I've got them, but oh my God, it's just kind of horrendous to go back and listen.
It's really funny. Yeah. I mean, I listened to some of that stuff and I'm like, wow, okay. People go, you have a great voice. I'm like, well, I didn't always. You know what I mean? People are like, did you? It's just really, but you're finding your footing when you're young in radio, and.
For sure.
But it was something that I loved so much that I'm so grateful I was able to do. This is going to be my 36th year I start next year doing radio professionally. So that's great.
You graduate from Rutgers.
Yeah, well, I didn't actually graduate. That's the other thing. I went right into working at a radio station, so I never graduated. Which is, although I will say this, you're going to get a kick out of this. They're very proud of me, so I'm in their alumni magazine a lot. Okay. I was in their their what do you call it? Their
yearbook?
Not their yearbook, but their every year when they do a thing and they show a film to the new students that might come in.
Like orientation.
Orientation.
Week,
I'm in the orientation video with James Gandolfini, Calista Floclkhart, Jane Krasnowski.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Who else is in there? Mario Batlai was in there, of course. Who I was friends with, like a bunch of people. I mean,
you are to Rutgers what Bill Gates was to. Was it Harvard that Bill Gates dropped out of?
It's funny. Yeah, I just did because I had a radio job and I was spinning nightclubs, believe it or not, around there 3-4 nights a week. And it was really until this radio station signed on in 1984. Basically, it had been a station that these two guys, Mike Marone and Rich Robinson.
Are we talking about WHTG?
HTG, yes. Okay. Which was 106.3. It was a Jersey Shore radio station. They turned it into like a freeform FM station, which was leaning, of course, alternative, although it played everything. But it became a station that, I was hired to do weekends. And then whenever a snowstorm happened or a holiday, I would say I'd raise my hand when nobody else wanted to work. I drive down Route 18 through a snowstorm. I did break down once on Route 18 on New Year's Day. Not a good time to have to walk like 3 miles with a gas can.
Before your shift?
After.
Oh, okay.
After it was an overnight. At least I didn't miss the shift, right? But and you can depend on all that nasty northeast weather. I'm always, that's why I love living in California.
So you're on the air at HTG.
Yeah.
You're also at that point DJing. It's the Melody Bar.
The Melody, right?
And that becomes like a pretty big deal, doesn't it?
It does. It becomes a pretty legendary place that people came from all over the world. And like everybody used to come hang out there, whether you were like Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails or John Bon Jovi.
Wow.
People like that would come by and hang out there. Not all the time, but I mean, they would always drop in there. It was well known.
So you've got to be, your early 20s, I'm assuming at this time, just like loving it.
Oh, I was. I mean, when I started in the clubs, it was still, the drinking age was 18. Then it went 19 when I went 19. Then it went 21 when I went 21. So I kind of went wrong. I went across. I don't drink anymore. Well, obviously, I started very young.
Hey, I was going to ask you that because I do want to get into it. And sometimes, unfortunately, the podcast gets a little out of order, but that's when you kind of got your first taste at this club. And I got to believe at that time, I'm a little bit younger than you are, but I look back at that era and I'm like, oh my God, it could not have been a more fun time to live. Just the party scene.
We had a blast. I mean, we did. It was a crazy party scene. The party was
the early 80s?
Continue. Yeah, it was the early 80s, and then
yeah.
throughout the 80s. And I worked there for a long time, but I had one daughter born in 1986, and I mean the club was how I supported her because I was still doing weekends at the station. And even when I took over as music director at the station in 1990 and then became program directors after that, I still had to work 2 other jobs. I still had to do like weddings and parties and do the club. You had to do it because it was a mom and pop station in Asbury Park, New Jersey, in that market. Great place and I learned a lot there and did a lot of great stuff with artists. And we really, we were a different radio station. But we were like kind of got the station got really well known there. NEW would still come down and do their like, their big, I forgot, Memorial Day concerts.
Right.
By the time I started running the station, we owned Asbury Park, the Fast Lane, the Stone Pony, everything. I mean, and I'm not saying this just because of me. I'm just the station had built a real
that kind of credibility
following. And then it really, what made sense was it was playing the REMs and the Cures and all the Water Boys, or whoever it is, the indie bands. Or what you would call alternative or postmodern back then.
I mean, what's it like at your age, early 80s, just kind of setting the scene? You're at a nightclub that's very popular.
Yeah.
John Bon Jovi is hanging out there. He's like at the pinnacle of his success.
Yeah,
I guess
he
still a
came
little
around
early on.
like little 90, 87.
Yeah.
But it was amazing because I grew up in the town next to John. And I used to work with Richie Sambora, the guitar player, in a bar. Called Charlie's Uncle. And Richie was like, it's really funny because we were at the VMAs. It was Grammys a few years back when Richie was still part of the band, and I was interviewing Richie and John, and we were joking around, and I go, Richie, how about when we were working at Charlie's Uncle? And he goes, I go, yeah, I was there Tuesday night spinning New Wave, and you were there Wednesday nights, playing with your trio. He goes, and Thursday nights, and Friday nights, Saturday nights, and he goes, Sunday nights acoustic, and John Bon Jovi looks at Richie and goes, what's the matter? You couldn't give our brother another night? it was pretty funny, But
are you pinching yourself at this time, or are you still because you're working so hard, it still doesn't seem real, right? You don't even have time. Yeah. You've got you're on air, you're DJing, you're still making at this point trying to make ends meet. But is this where MTV finds you? How does MTV come to be?
This all kind of comes about when I became music director. All of a sudden, it changed my life completely. That was the first phase of my life changing.
Music director at Rutgers or HTG?
No, at HTG.
Okay.
I mean, there were certainly a lot of things we did at Rutgers, but HTG was the difference because at that point, alternative music was really starting to bubble under and build a groundswell before the Nirvana explosion.
Okay.
So, there was a lot, so I was there doing it as music director, going out to events, and I met all the MTV people that were in music programming at these events. And some of them lived in Lower Manhattan or in Long Island where they could get our signal from the Jersey Shore.
Okay.
You couldn't get it in Manhattan.
Oh,
it was kind of like the same way that LIR or DRE were big stations in Long Island, but you really couldn't hear them on the island of Manhattan. So, I'd meet them out and they'd go, I love your station. So the thing that happened for me for MTV was, there were also a couple other issues. I won like 2 back-to-back Gavin Awards for Alternative Music Director of the Year in 91 and 92.
Sure. Gavins were huge. I mean, how old are you at this point?
How old am I at that point? I'm in my early 30s, mate. Like cracking 30, something like that. 30. Yeah, around that period.
Are you still on the air as well?
Oh, I stayed on the air.
So you're on the air doing music.
So believe it or not, at one point, I was working 7 days a week at the station and doing the nightclubs because I didn't want to give up my weekend shift, even though I wasn't on the air during the week as music director. So eventually they were like, Michael Butcher, who was a PD who came from HFS, said to me, man, you should be doing middays. So it worked out. I started doing middays. And then eventually I did afternoon drive.
When you do something, Matt, you go all in, man.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not afraid to work hard.
Yeah, no,
it's and that's the thing. I put all my energy into it.
Okay, so you're hanging out with the MTV crew. You guys are going to showcases together and record companies. So.
And there's a guy named Kurt Steffek who works on 120 Minutes in Alt Nation. Him and Louis Largent, who used to be at K-Rock here, and it starts out. They say, we love your station, and Kurt Steffek asks, hey, do you mind if we call and track some alternative records with you, because I can tell you're a very honest guy, and if you feel that something's really working, at least in your market, or if you feel like it's a lot of hype, they go, I just like to figure that into some of our thinking, just
okay,
if we're on the fence about something. So they started tracking records with me, and we built a friendship. I met Louis Largent out here in Los Angeles through the guys in the band Dramarama, and when, he was first working at K-Rock with Andy Schuon there. And
Right.
I remember he might have been Poor Man's, on Loveline. Might have been
By the
Poor
way,
Man's.
did you hear that on a total tangent? But he called in on Bean's last show about a week ago, and they finally, I guess, made amends. Which was after 25.
After that thing where he sent them to his house.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's something to be pissed off about.
Yeah,
I have to say. I mean,
and apparently one of them cut the electricity, I guess, and a listener cut the electricity.
Yeah.
And, but fascinating story. Sorry to go on, but
but it's a great story for those people listening. It was it was one of those things where they had an argument about something, and then he said on the air, gave out his address. Which is not something us radio people would really do not appreciate necessarily. But Kevin and Bean are such great guys. Now, I was just in Vegas doing a presentation with Andy Schuon earlier this week, who, of course, put Kevin and Bean together and gave them their award at the Radio Hall of Fame.
Right, just the other night. So let's go back.
Let's go back in time.
You're back at HTG.
Okay, and so I'm doing this thing, stuff with the MTV guys, and how I end up on the air there is... all of a sudden, I'm opening an album network, maybe it was. I mean, remember when we had all the different music trades? We had Radio and Records, we had Gavin.
Sure. Network 40.
We had Network 40, we had the Hard Report. We had everything.
R&R.
R&R, so, of course, R&R, those great R&R barbecues.
Yeah.
But
such great events, man.
I missed that period of when there were 5 or 6 radio trades because... There was always something going on. But anyway.
I do too. I unfortunately got in at the tail end. I had a good time in the the 90s, and it started to kind of wane there. But I would have loved to come in the exact same era that you were there.
Yeah. I was very, very blessed. I mean, I love the opportunity that I had. And Faye Gay, the woman who owned the radio station, was very eccentric. But, what was great was when Michael Butcher came in there, just to back up a second, he was going to just give somebody else a music director job. And she goes, I think there's one more person you really have to meet, Michael. And then he met me and made me the music director. And like I said, that changed my trajectory at that moment, because all of a sudden these radio record company people were like, wow, man, he really loves music. Like he's looking for reasons to try to play records, not to not play them.
Not only do you love it, and I think that's certainly some criteria to be a music director, but you know music, honest to God, Matt, better than anyone I've ever met in my life.
Well, thank you for saying that, Chachi.
Understanding of music, and it's so diverse. It's not even a certain specific, I love 80s rock music, and I can talk about that intelligently, or pop music, but across the board.
Well, because I never ever, start to feel like, I'm too old to listen to what's going on. Even in those early years, I listened to every genre. I found something good in every genre. I remember a guy from one of the main guys who did A&R at Epic was shocked when his alternative guy told him that artist Desiree was going to be, that I thought she would be big and have a big record.
You Gotta Be, Desiree?
Yeah, remember You Gotta Be? And she had a song before that called Feel So High. And he was in shock that this alternative guy was talking to him about like a jazzy R&B record.
Right.
But I'm just... you were
right.
So I just, I just love all different types of music. And there's 2 different types of music. I said to Gayle King one day, I said, well, there's 2 different types of music. She goes, I really love the fact that you like everything. I said, well, Gayle, there's only 2 different types of music. The music that moves you and the music that doesn't. She goes, I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal that from you. Anyway,
that's a great line.
She was really super cool. But
so now you're hanging. We still don't know
how this happened. So how I end up on MTV.
How do you end up on MTV?
Here's what happens. I open up an album network, and it mentions that Dave Kendall is departing 120 minutes. So I call up Kurt Steffek, and I say to him, and this is not. It wasn't arrogant. It was more ignorance and just and some confidence. But I called him up. I said, hey, what happened with Dave Kendall? He goes, well, he got blown out. And I said, you guys need somebody like me to do that show who knows the music and can interview the artists. And he goes, well, I don't know if you'll still be in the demo. That's pretty funny because I ended up on MTV for like another 10 years. But
it's your early 30s at this time.
Yeah, very beginning of the 30s. And he goes, but let me talk to the bosses here, and I'll call you back in a week. And he calls me back in an hour. He goes, hey, I want you to come in for an audition. But it took a little while because 120 minutes was not a huge priority show for them, even though it was hugely influential. So I go in. I'd never done TV before. I'm cottonmouth because I'm a little nervous. Steve Leeds, who used to book, he was the original head of talent there in the Mark Goodman, Martha Quinn days. He came from a background of promoting radio. Now he's at Sirius XM. He's their head of the talent booking for all the music people that come in there. But Steve was very supportive because he was working at Polygram and Polydor, and he came to my audition because he had used to do that. And the funniest thing in the world, my friend reminded me that I wore a Morrissey shirt with a hole in the there was a hole in the shoulder. So
That's, I mean, back to you just being so authentic, though. You're just so real. So you're in there, you're now interviewing for a TV gig on MTV, which is now a big network.
So influential. I mean, it was ultimately, it was the biggest top 40 station in the world.
And you've not even been a major market jock at this point.
No,
I mean, no disrespect, but you're coming out of
No, but it's true. I'm coming from New Jersey, from Asbury Park. So, I kind of did some test breaks. I did some cool throws. Just told them my background about myself and the music.
I mean, your heart just pounding, or
it was weird. I was convinced I had to do it, but I was a little cottonmouth. So there were some nerves there, definitely.
I'm sure, yeah.
Little deer in headlights action, if you know what I mean.
Love
I was like, oh man. And it's funny because even my first show that I did, I filled in '93 with Depeche Mode. Because at this point, they were having artists host it.
Hold on 2 seconds. I want to hear this. But so you do this audition.
Yeah.
You leave. Do you think I nailed it, or you're like, oh my God?
Well, I hope they like it.
Okay.
So I get a copy of it sent to me on VHS. So I get to watch what it looks like.
Oh, you get to see it after.
I get to see it after. And it wasn't bad. I mean, it wasn't bad. So the thing. But when I did the first show I ever did, I was a fill-in.
When did you get the call that I want to hear about this moment about?
Well, the call was, I got the call from Lauren Levine, who was the head of talent at the time, and she was this British woman, and she was she comes up later in the story again. What's really cool, she goes, look, we've been having artists host it. Some are good and some are bad. She goes, but Depeche Mode do not want to host their own episode. So here's your chance. Why don't you come in and do this? So I go in.
So that was the call. So
that was the call.
It was kind of like
93, January.
You've got one episode, it kind of sounds like. That
Yeah,
we'll let you do the Depeche Mode.
Yeah.
But that's,
see what happens.
Still, you got to be, what's the feeling? Are you
Well, here's the feeling. The feeling's amazing, but it's also, I'll tell you how it plays out. So I loved doing it that day. I was a little stiff, but not really when I look back at some of that footage. I was stiffer than I obviously was when I came back in 95 and was hosting it regularly. But in 93, with Depeche Mode, the hardest part about it was, when these British bands get off a plane, a lot of times they're jet lagged or they party the whole night when they get out.
Sure.
And then they got to get up early. They're in a different time zone. So Dave Gahan, the singer, was, he was great. He was like engaging with me. And Martin Gore, who's great, the songwriter, keyboard player, but he was like looking off to the side out of it. And I'm like, I'm looking at him. And all I'm thinking is, Martin, look at me. You're going to kill this gig for me before it even starts. So eventually I get him back into the conversation. But for years I've joked around with him and go, you almost killed my career, Martin. What the fuck,
So how did the first show, outside of Martin being spaced out, how does it go in general?
It went well. It definitely went well. And but it was a new thing. So I remember going back to the melody and having to watch it. I watched it at the nightclub because I was spinning that night. And we turned I stopped spinning. We watched the show at midnight.
Oh my God, that's
2.
cool. You remember calling your parents and telling them? I mean, they had to be so proud of you.
Yeah, I think they were. I think they were. I think my mom didn't understand it as much as my dad did in the beginning.
Yeah,
like what it really meant. So it was. I enjoyed doing it. I got a phone call from that woman, Laura Levine, and she says, and I love Martin Gore, but she goes, "You did a great job with Martin Bohr," and she goes with her English accent, and she goes, listen, we think you did a great job. We'll be talking to you more in the future. So I'm pretty excited. And I hear from Andy Schuon, and he invites me up to his office. And I'm like, wow, maybe I'm getting this gig. Or maybe I'm sharing it with somebody. I don't know. I'm like, but if they're calling me up to MTV Building,
right? This
is awesome.
And just so I know the order, at this point, Andy's left here, and he's at MTV.
He's at MTV, right.
Okay, so he's left K-Rock.
Yeah.
Kevin Weatherly's come up to LA.
Yeah, Kevin Weatherly's come up to LA and doing K-Rock. Andy had met me at a barbecue at Kurt Steffek's house, and he said this the other night. He said, I really liked you. He goes, you were so authentic and cool. He goes, I said, we got to bring that guy in somehow and do something with him. So I guess he was the one who suggested it to Lauren Levine because it was his choice. So when I get up to his office, he says to me, he's like, and Andy was super sweet. He goes, Matt, I just want you to know how great a job you did. He goes, look, we're going to have Louis Largent do 120 minutes, but we want to use you as a backup when he can't do it or something like that, which was a nice thing.
Okay.
It was also kind of a heart drop moment because I thought I was getting the gig. So I had to go do an interview for Geffen Records for Luke Wood, who now is a partner in Beats Headphones with Jimmy and Dre. Luke had hired me to do an interview with this band called the Waterboys from Scotland, and Wells. And my heart was sunk to my shoes. I was walking down the streets of New York, and I was like, oh, man. But it was also because, you go back home, and people are like, well, what's up? Did you get it? And then, it's like, you got to go back. I mean, I wasn't planning on leaving the station anyway at that point in time, but I went back. And the bottom line is when I was interviewed in the press there about it, I said exactly what Andy said to me. I said, well, Louis Sargent's going to host the show. I'm going to do backup. I'll be a backup host for them. But it was a great experience. I kept it really cool that way. Yeah. And then I would call Andy once a month. And I remember this is, before emails and all that other stuff. And I would call him once a month and leave my name on his call list because I wouldn't be a pain in the ass. It wasn't, I knew better. You don't harass people because they're busy. And you don't take things too personally because people have other things going on in their lives that are in management. And you know that. I mean, I know that from doing it personally. And, eventually I'm at a dinner with the MTV, the whole music department, before Green Day plays Saturday Night Live. And they were actually, Patty Galuzzi was working there and Stephen Hill, who ended up running BET. They came from, a radio at Brown.
Right.
They said to me, or they were mentioning, we're looking for a PD that might come up here. And at this point, I love what I was doing at HTG, but I'd hit a wall. I mean, I won the awards. We were Rolling Stone. We were one of their small to medium market best radio stations voted by fans. I mean, we had done a lot of things, but it was time for me to make some kind of move.
Right.
So, and like Tom Calderon, who was at LIRDRE, Steve Leeds, all those people were like, you gotta go check out some other stations that actually have BDS, because we were in a little station. Our market didn't have BDS, and BDS became very important to the record labels and support that they would give the radio stations at that point, so they could
being a reporting station.
Was
still means something today, but it really meant something.
It really meant something then because it wasn't all the markets. And I remember that I was at this dinner. And I heard her say, we're looking for somebody that might want to be a PD at Brown. I'm like, at BRU, because BRU was a college station, but it was a paid gig for a program director and for the people there over in Providence. And I said, I'd be interested in that. And she goes, are you kidding me? You leave HTG? I'm thinking to myself, leave HTG? I got to work 3 jobs. Of course I would. I loved HTG, but I'm working 3. I'm still spinning people's birthdays and anniversaries.
Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. Well, close to that. Yeah. You know what I mean? But so what happened was then I thought, oh, man. Then Andy calls me and goes, Rick Krim's leaving to go to EMI Music Publishing and Tracy Jordan's leaving for Motown. He goes, how would you like to be in our music department, one of our music programmers? He goes, it's 10 people for the entire country, the world, basically coming out of New York City.
So you have 2 opportunities to present themselves simultaneously.
And I was nervous because Patty was on the music department at MTV, but I thought, well, does she have a commitment to Brown where she has to get somebody? I'd rather not move to Providence if I don't have to. I'd rather stay in Jersey and work in New York City.
And you're still doing fill-ins for 120 minutes, correct?
Yes.
How often are you filling in?
Almost none.
None. All right.
Almost not at all. So there's the deal. It was
he's never sick. He's never on vacation.
Yeah, well, he never wanted to really do it in the first place. He kept telling them he goes, put Matt on the air, man. What are you doing? And so did the producer, Rick Hankey. And then they had artists. And I think it was kind of Lauren Levine, I think the British woman who I love, but at the time, I think they weren't ready they didn't think the world was ready for a short, bald guy. You know what I mean? It knows a lot about music.
I'm still not sure.
Yeah,
the world
I'm still not
sure.
I don't think so. Yes, but it's so funny. But so anyway, I go and I'm worried that Patty's going to hire me for Brown, and I'm like, but I'd rather be in the MTV Music Department. They call me together, and she goes, "No." I go, "What? Oh, sorry, Patty. I thought you were worried about Brown." She goes, "Are you kidding me? This is where I work. You need to come here." So the craziest thing ever was, our radio station was in a house. The production studio was in the basement, and it was old equipment. There was sales office was in there. You had to walk through the owner's kitchen to get in there. It was in a house, right? And then the AMF and FM studios were out where the reception desk was.
Oh my
It was in a
gosh.
house. Anyway, we had 3 phone lines, and this is in the 90s, early 90s. And I know Andy's going to call me, and I'm like, oh my God, all the phone lines are taken up. The sales department's on the phone, the request lines, everybody's calling. Finally, Andy gets through, and he goes, Matt, I've been trying to call you for about an hour. I go, man, I'm so sorry, Andy. I go, we only have 3 lines here, man. It's really crazy. You can hardly ever get on the phone. He goes, I'll tell you what, why don't you come work for us and work with me, and I'll make sure you have more than 3 phone lines. And that was the call. And I went and became manager of music programming at MTV, which was beautiful.
What's the day-to-day as being manager of music programming?
It was amazing because I love so many different genres of music, the people that are there, although they'll have expertise maybe in one genre, most of the people there would have to also understand pop, top 40, and all the other genres. So, yeah, I mean, here's what it would be. It was always a committee of 10, okay? And so Mondays was acquisitions day. So it's kind of in the same way that a music department, I've sat in on some of the K-Rock music department meetings here in LA with Kevin Weatherly and the folks here. And it's one of those things where you get all the acquisitions. So just like in a radio station where you play all the songs in a row, and then you keep notes and see what things you might want to add, and if you have space at all this week, or maybe it goes to a specialty show. That's what it was like. So on Mondays, we'd get anywhere from 35 to 50, and we'd sit there from 1 in the afternoon, and we would, we'd order
And these
lunch.
are already fully produced videos.
Fully produced videos come through, and we go, that's great for 120 minutes. That one's great for MTV Raps. Why don't we do that one for jams? Why don't, you know what I mean?
And then
that one's full rotation pop record. You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Did you have label reps coming to visit you much like at a radio station?
All the time.
All the time.
All the time. But the difference was, in those early days, some of the reps who were originally handled by different people in the departments had like you represented Sony or Columbia Epic and maybe Warner's or that kind of thing. But with me, I was always like the at-large guy. So I could deal with everybody, and everybody really did deal with everybody anyway. I mean, even though, because that kind of didn't make as much sense. I thought, I get why they wanted to have one label person so they weren't calling everybody when they were going to submit a new video. You had to represent, but so we would do that. And then the next day, Tuesdays, we'd be in Andy's office and we would decide which videos would, whether they would be like all day parts, lunar rotation,
right?
And and then which things would drop and we would keep. So that would be a pretty intense meeting because that's where people are fighting for different things. But it was everybody was really great and respectful to each other, and it was there were some classic moments. It was a beautiful learning experience.
I'm sure.
For me.
I mean, a perfect gig for you.
Yeah,
obviously with your understanding and love of music.
Yeah, and all genres, too. I mean, I love I was in hip hop, everything.
So you're in the building now and working in the music department. And how does 120 minutes come back? Are you still doing fill-in at this time?
Nope. I mean, here's the thing. When I did my last radio show on HTG, I did it for 8 hours. I did the afternoon drive into midday because, I really thought I wasn't, honestly, I never thought I would be able to do a radio show again professionally or a TV show. I thought I was going to be behind the scenes, which was fine with me because, I had a daughter and it was going to be a raise, obviously, and it was a great opportunity for me that was national. So I put all the ego, it wasn't even just ego, but the love of doing radio aside.
Yeah.
And anything like that. And plus I didn't want them to think I had a hidden agenda to be on the air.
Okay.
So I never brought it up. And all of a sudden, a few months into me being there, remember, I'm doing what they call talent and relations too. So I'm in the studio getting very comfortable being around other people working and taking care of the artists as they come in and out of there.
So when bands come through, right.
So now I know everybody in the studio and I know the studio like the back of my hand. It's not like even the first 2 times I was there. So I get a call from Lauren Levine. Matt, Oasis are coming in and they don't want to host their own episode. She goes, I'll tell you what, we're going to give you 3 weeks and see how it goes. So I do this thing with Oasis, and I'm screwing around with them, having a good time. I almost smacked Bonehead in the head, the one guy in the band, because we were just having a good time. Like,
and I mean, that's a Gallagher and Noel. I mean, that is a very difficult interview. Yeah, it was were you nervous about that?
No, I wasn't. It was because I've done so many interviews by this point at the radio station over the years.
And they're together at this point.
No, yeah, and Liam wasn't there. It was Bonehead, the guitar player, and it was Noel the first time.
Right.
So, and I know it was so funny because Bonehead, he made they started fighting over Manchester City or Manchester United, the soccer teams, football teams. So I look at the camera and go, when these guys finish up and figure out whose team is better, we'll be back after this with some more. So I was just having a good time. Once it was over, the woman, Lauren Levine, who I originally think didn't put me on because of my bald head, came out and said, I've done a complete 180. You need to be hosting the show every week after she saw watched me shoot the first episode.
Amazing, with Oasis.
With Oasis. And
do you have a teleprompter? Is it scripted?
Well, there's parts of it that are, because obviously you have a teleprompter to throw in and out of videos. But all my interview stuff and everything else is all on the fly. Like I did everything, all that stuff on the fly, and a lot of the information about the videos. And that was the funny thing. When M2 started, MTV2, which was a channel, but right now it's it's totally different. It's more of an urban channel. But when it started, it was an answer to the fact that they were putting so many reality shows on the regular MTV. So Toni DiSanto used to come up to me, who was one of the main programming guys, and go, "Hey, Matt, we're looking for somebody like you for the new channel. We're going to do M2." And a couple weeks go by, he comes up to me, he goes, "You know anybody that's kind of like you that we might be able to put on the air there on M2?
My friend Chachi.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, you're right. But so like a few weeks later, he goes, we're having a lot of trouble finding somebody that's got the right vibe. And then 3 weeks after that, he goes, "You're doing it." So I was doing both MTV and M2. And
you're doing artist relations, and you're in the music department.
So I was doing all that.
4 jobs.
At the time, it was wonderful. I loved it. I mean, I love being busy. It's Andy Schuon said it to me the other night, and I remember Judy McGrath, the president at the time, saying to me, you have the highest, at this point, I mean, I know Carson's probably the most popular VJ there ever, but she said to me, I mean, like Andy was saying the other night, he goes, "You're at least number 2, or you're up there." Because I remember Judy McGrath saying to me, and Andy telling me that he heard this from Van Toffler, that, because Judy said to me one night at Tom Freston's wedding, she goes, "Hey, Matt, it's pretty amazing." She goes, "You're the most popular VJ, but highest Q rating with the least burn." She goes, amazing. "And I told you that because I know you're not going to try and put us over a barrel." And she had a couple cocktails. Yeah. But I love her. They were so good to me. I'll tell you, the thing that was great about them is they let me be myself. And which is something that's pretty amazingly rare you'll find in a situation like that. So it was a perfect storm. And
are you getting paid? Are you making good money?
No. I mean, no, not really. I mean, I was, where do I sign when I got there? Because I'm coming from a small market. I'm like, hey, what do you want me to do? I'll give you my first 16 born. It ended up going really well. And the funny thing about M2 was we would only break twice an hour, and we'd talk about some things we saw right before and what's coming up. And people would go, "Oh my God, how did he fit that much on a cardboard? Like they had a big cardboard piece." And people were like, "God, man, how small is that writing?" And then they walk around and just be the name of the song and the artist. So that would be me just doing it. Just like radio.
Ad-libbing.
Like radio.
Yeah, so you're
like radio.
Really was a hybrid of radio and television.
Yeah, I mean, radio prepared me for that. Yeah. And that's why radio's the great. I mean, I love radio still more than anything in the world.
You think about so many great hosts have come out of radio. Dick Clark. Obviously, Ryan Seacrest.
Yeah. Guys who started in radio and loved radio. Yeah. I know Ryan loved radio, man. And I mean, God, Ryan's a machine. He's unbelievable. He's just, I have so much respect for what he's been able to do.
How's your personal life at this time? How old's your daughter? What's going on?
Well, my daughter is young. She's probably, let me think for a minute now. All right. So she's probably around 8 she's about 9.
Okay.
And then my first marriage, we got married way too young. We met each other at the club. It was not destined to. We were very different people. We were one thing when we were partying and we were younger, and she graduated college and we started seeing each other. But, we were not interested really at all in the same things. But we, obviously had the mutual love for our daughter. So we got divorced. And that was that. But the important thing was, the hardest part for me was being away from my daughter. I mean, I hated that. That part of it. But
was your daughter still in New York, or did they move?
No,
down
they were in Jersey the whole time.
Oh, Jersey the whole time.
And that's the first marriage. I got divorced twice.
Okay.
I'm very, very close friends with my second ex-wife. We're very, very tight, and my 19-year-old daughter with her is both my daughters are amazing. I have one daughter who lives in New York City, know, and then I have another daughter who lives in Florida with her mom. And I have 2 beautiful daughters who are both really incredibly level-headed. I am so grateful they didn't go down some of the road that I did when I was, partying and getting out of control. Yeah. I couldn't be more grateful because, I know from being, in the program and from knowing other adults who have children, that sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Sometimes the children will follow in the footsteps, and there's a lot of heartbreak. There's deaths of children. There's overdoses. There's A lot of things. So I've been very, very blessed.
Yeah.
That's all I can tell you.
Well, congratulations, man.
Yeah.
I mean, you should. You're such a wonderful person, and you've got nothing but love. And I'm sure you raised him well.
Yeah, it's kind of you to say. Absolutely. I mean, I'm very close to both my daughters, and that's a great thing.
You were just overseeing the one in Florida, right? Just a couple weeks ago.
Yes, I was. Yeah, absolutely. And then right before that, my other daughter was out here visiting me from Brooklyn. That's great. So
that's great that you're close with both of them.
Yeah.
So is this at this time? I mean,
right.
You're living high in the life. You're at MTV. You're on the air. People recognizing you on the streets.
Well, the funniest thing in the world was because I was a big fish in a small pond, in Jersey, really well liked and well recognized, and I was very grateful of that. Because I came at things with the same, even as program and music director, and as an on-air talent, we really, one of the things that I know that Bruce Springsteen really appreciated about it down there, and Bruce actually called my bosses, Tom Freston and Judy McGrath at MTV, and said, "You look out for that guy." I remember.
Are you serious?
Yeah, he goes, I remember we were on our way to a Page and Plant show, me and the music department in a van at the Meadowlands Arena, and I remember they start goofing on me, and they're like, "Yeah, man, you gotta take care of Pinfield." I'm like, "What are you guys on about? What the fuck are you guys saying?" And those guys are like, Bruce called Freston and McGrath. I'm like,
"That's
on your behalf,"
insane.
and I go, "Get the fuck out of here." I didn't really believe him. Sorry about the language.
No,
it's
a podcast.
It's a podcast. You can say whatever. So turns out, yes, Bruce called the bosses, told them, "I'm not from the corporate world. Make sure you look out for that guy. He's a good guy."
Where did you meet him?
I met Bruce. Well, he listened to me on the radio every day because he lived down there in Colts Neck and Rumson in that area.
God.
So he loved the radio station. One of the other things he really appreciated was that one of my philosophies down there is because there was so much homegrown talent was to put on some local music in there mixed in because perception is reality. And when people heard that next to, a big band, like they would, like next to Sting or something else, they go, oh, they're playing down there. And they would, we'll go see them.
Yeah.
So, but I also didn't, the thing, I always said this, I'm like, you do that, but also you sandwich stuff that's recognizable with things that people know because you can't go crazy over the left. You've got to make sure that your people are you play great recognizable music and you introduce music, but you do it so that people can digest it. You don't overload them. And it was that was a philosophy I think most programmers have.
I mean, Bruce Springsteen's now ordained you,
which is amazing. And then I ran into him right before that at a show, and we were talking for a while. And then the best thing in the world was that Lauren Levine, the British woman who I told you, I think kept me off the air, but then put me on the air. And I, again, I love her dearly at this, even now. But she told me another story. We're going to see Oasis play at the Academy, and this is 90. Let's guess that this is 96. And she goes, "You know what? Bruce was asking about you again the other night." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I go. He's probably already forgot who I am. She goes, "Nope. We were." This is hilarious. So he's rehearsing for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame performance, and they're bringing us in like VH1's music department, our music department, our bosses, Diane Sawyer, and people like that to watch that Michael Jackson video for that History compilation album. The video where like there's helicopters going around the statue of him.
Yeah.
So they want Sony Epic was having presentations of that in Sony studios, which no longer exist, by the way, where there were a lot of great unplugs, Hard Rock Lives, storytellers. And she told me the story that they're leaving. So this is Judy McGrath, Freston, Van Toffler, and she's with them. Maybe Andy, I'm not sure who was there. Probably all of them. And they were leaving from watching that, and they go around a corner, and Bruce and the E Street Band are rehearsing for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame performance. And they walk in, and he's going through a song, and he stops. And he turns around, looks at them, and they go, "Hey, Bruce, how you doing?" He goes, "Doing good." He goes, "You guys taking care of Pinfield?" That's exactly what he said to them. And then he goes, "Of course." He goes, "All right," and turns around and just starts playing another song again.
Oh, my God.
So Lauren Levine had told me that a couple nights later, and I was just blown away. So I waited 7 years to thank Bruce because eventually I ended up working at Columbia Records in A&R, which I'll jump ahead, but he had brought in The Rising. And so if you were a senior director or above, and I was a senior director, got promoted to vice president because I had some hit records as an A&R guy, but you could be there in the Sony Club when he brought the album and played it, and you'd listen to the whole album, they had the lyrics out, and then he came out and said hi to everybody and kind of we were shuffled by Bruce. And I walked up to him and I said, Bruce, man, I've been wanting to thank you for 7 years for those nice things that you said to my bosses. He goes, hey, Matt, don't worry about that, man. He goes, what do you think of the album? He's so unassuming, he was just, he did it because he wanted to. You couldn't pay him to endorse anything that he didn't really care about. Bruce says, he doesn't have to.
What a touching story.
It was a beautiful story for me. And it's also home state, the Jersey things.
I'm going to come back to kind of you living high in the life and everything else, but let's talk. You brought about Columbia. Before Columbia, though, I met you for the very first time when you were at Farm Club.
Yes.
And that was that project with Jimmy Iovine, correct?
Yeah, it was. So Farm Club came about because here we are, it's the end of 99. And my friend reaches out to me who produced one of my shows. It was called Matt Rock, and it was very much like it was it came after Headbangers Ball. That's why so many people think I hosted Headbangers Ball, because it was like that. I mean, they thought I hosted that N120, but I hosted a show called Matt Rock, which basically was my version of Headbangers Ball, but had all this crazy cool graphics like a horror film, and it was really well done. This guy named Austin Redding, who now does like stuff for Adult Swim. He produces TV shows. He's directed movies. He's doing really great. And I love the guy. He calls me up and goes, hey, man, there's this new thing that Andy's going to be doing I'm hearing about with Jimmy Iovine. I'm like, really? What is it? And then he told me about Farm Club. So I wrote a letter to Andy and just said, hey, I'd really love to be involved with this. I think this would be really great. And, I got flown out by Jimmy Iovine. I remember there was something where I didn't bring my driver's license, but I had my passport on me. So I got there and they were going to get me a rent-a-car. And so Chris Kirkpatrick from NSYNC goes, hey, Matt, he goes, what, you stuck? You need a ride? He's such a good dude. So we've been friends ever since, he and I.
No
love
way.
him.
So you hitched a ride with...
I was going to hit, with Chris Kirkpatrick from NSYNC. And such a great guy. I mean, he's just an amazing guy.
I don't know if it was the pilot, but I remember they brought in a bunch of radio people. And I'm working in San Diego at this point at KFMB. And somehow I ended up at that event. It was up here in LA. I think maybe at Universal Studios or something.
Yeah, it was Universal Studios. It was.
And I think they sent like a limo or something for me, or a town car all the way from San Diego.
Oh, they spared no expense.
Yeah, it was a big deal. I remember coming up for it, and I think I probably indulged in one too many cocktails on the limousine ride.
It was unbelievable. I mean, I wasn't. Here's the thing. I'm not saying I wasn't drinking at the time, but I wasn't drinking when I was on the air. Because, we had our dressing rooms there, me and Allie Landry. You remember she was Miss USA, the Doritos commercial?
Yeah.
So her and I were co-hosts. They had a yin and yang. You had a beautiful woman there who's super cool. She was great to work with. And then you had the music guy.
A great-looking Leonardo DiCaprio type.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, for those people who can't, who aren't wearing their glasses. No, it's funny. So it was a great experience. I remember we were shooting on the lot, stage 42. What was so crazy is they used stage 41 for a party room.
Yes.
So remember that room, and it had like food and sushi down the like it was. I never went in there because I was always working.
Stacked with beautiful women
and beautiful food. They had all the Playmates were coming there. The Playmates were there, like from Playmates to porn stars to like. Yeah. I even remember like Tim Armstrong from Rancid and. I think who was it? It was maybe it was one of the guys from Smash Mouth or one of the other bands, like going Steve or somebody like that, going. This is the best party in LA, and it's a TV show. It was so unbelievable because we were always working inside, and it was so incredibly done. I mean, we loved the show. It was just, and I remember it was selling so many CDs that me and Dr. Dre were in a picture on the cover of the business section of the New York Times. That's how good it was doing because, see, Jimmy and Doug Morris had this brilliant idea to buy the hour right after Raw and War. When Raw and War were the two highest rated TV hours, that's when wrestling was at its highest point. So we had a 15 share coming in.
Amazing.
So you got to figure our first half hour went from like a 15 or 13 to like an 8 maybe to like a 4 at the end, but it was still, it meant we were the third highest rated cable show. In cable for like a long period of time.
Incredible.
The amazing thing, though, the thing that really turned out to be like the blessing that becomes the curse is that, and we had, eventually what was really cool is for a while, it was just Universal artists, right? And then Andy Schuon had talked to Polly Anthony over at Epic and eventually Warner Brothers and Sony were bringing all their artists on the show because it was selling CDs and, they took a shot and then, everybody. We had U2 on there. I went to Dublin to their studio, Wimbledon, interviewed Edge and Bono. in their studio, looked out the window, and that's where they shot the video on the bog when they were like young kids for Gloria. You know, like it was just this incredible experience. The show was great. The funniest story I like to tell people is, and this is, you're going to laugh at, and people are like probably saying, fuck you, man. You know what I mean? But I remember, I'm like, so I call in and I go, hey, so what do I have to do today? They go, we're sending a limo for you. You're going to go play volleyball with the Playboy Playmates on the beach in Malibu. I'm like, gee, that's really tough work, man. Do I really have to?
You are such an asshole. The limo that picks me up takes me to go see you. The limo that picks you up, you get to go see Playmates play volleyball.
It was hilarious. And then we did it one other time. I went out with the Playmates to Catalina Island from Long Beach, and we went scuba diving out there together. And that was like... And I'm like, people are like, what? They go, fuck you, asshole. And I'm like, you know what? Hey.
Oh, my God.
I did it because I could. I mean, they asked me to do it.
I don't spite you for it.
Because they had a deal with Playboy. So they had a deal with Playboy. I mean, it was incredible.
So how did Farm Club end up?
Here's what it did.
Right?
The problem was a lot of things started to happen at the same time. It was doing unbelievable. Right after we had our biggest show with U2 Live there, and you know, it was Wyclef. I think I can't remember who else happened to be on that show that night, but we thought, we were like, holy shit, look at this. Look how far we've come in a year, a little over a year. And the next thing you know, I hear in Andy's office. It doesn't sound happy. And from down the hallway, because I had an office, you know, working in the NBC Universal building over here, right by Universal Studios. And sure enough, we found out that our budget had been cut. But the thing that led up to it was bad. A lot of bad things started happening at once. That was one of them. They cut our budget. We ended up shooting after that on City Walk. You know what I mean? Doing stuff there. For a show that started out so great and did so great so long, it was kind of a bummer the way it ended. But I will say that the other thing, there were a lot of factors where the blessing became a curse with the buying that hour after Raw and War is. TNN outbid USA. And we lost the lead-in. Oh. So we no longer had a lead-in. So we're out there in the desert on a Monday night at 11 p.m., man, after some bad 80s B-movie rerun. And you're like, wow. So that hit the ratings. There was another thing that happened at the same time. You know, all those .coms going to .bombs in Silicon Valley in 2001.
And they were spending so much money on television advertising at that time.
Yeah, and there was so much of that. And I think at that time, Edgar Bronfman was... at Universal was just like, wow. I don't know. Maybe I got we got to do something about it. And so it only lasted so much longer, but it was an incredible experience. I loved it. I learned a lot from it. We had the greatest guests. I had some of the greatest times flying around the country. Here's the thing that a lot of people don't know. So Audrey Morrissey, who does The Voice, it was her who was doing the show. It was her. She was the one who was put in charge of production of the show. And I remember when I went and met with Andy and with Jimmy and later that night went to Fred Durst's house or something for chin-chins, something to eat. I remember that Audrey and I met at the Mondrian Hotel on the Sunset Boulevard. And one of the things that was very interesting that no one was doing on TV yet, I'm not saying that her and I deserve credit for it, but I don't, in my memory, I don't remember people doing something like this on a regular basis. We knew we were going to have people uploading their music at Farm Club. See, but people, for those listening who didn't know Farm Club, it was a website, a record label, and a TV show. Mm-hmm. And the idea was that Doug Morris and Jimmy Iovine, Universal and Interscope, wanted to have a place with new technology that was a community, way before MySpace or obviously way before Facebook, where people could go and they could congregate, but also people could upload their music. That's why they called it Farm Club. It was a place for people to farm talent.
Yeah.
And the idea was you'd play with our first show was Dre and Eminem, and we'd fly in some band who uploaded their music and got votes. But the cool thing was...
Great idea.
It was. It was just way ahead of its time, and the technology wasn't there yet.
Yeah, sure.
Not many people had a T2
They're still
line.
On dial-up.
They're on dial-up, and it's really hard. It's crashing when you're trying to put your song up there. But the idea was brilliant that Jimmy and Doug had. And Andy executed it, got really, really great things done. But, I'll never forget, I'm thinking back about it. Audrey and I, and I'll remind you, she's the one who does The Voice. we're sitting there in my hotel room at the Mondrian on Sunset Boulevard, and we're talking about like what we're gonna do. Yeah, we're gonna get these artists in here. She goes, Matt, what do you want to do? We both came to this agreement that why don't I fly out to where these artists are from and either surprise them or let them know I'm coming,
right?
And do packages on them. Packages meaning like kind of like a break where we show where they work, we meet their families, we give you a little love about the town. We were the first show to ever do that. Shortly after that, Survivor, American Idol, everything else used that template, that formula. It was the first show that ever did it was Farm Club, and I know that for a fact. Amazing. I don't walk around saying but it was like, it was obviously.
So you're doing Farm Club here in LA, and then you go back to New York to work at Columbia?
When it ends, I always wanted to do A&R because I always, that was the thing. Before I left to do Farm Club, David Massey, who now runs Arista Records, the new Arista, David Massey's the president there. David had this really strong belief in me as an A&R guy. He was the guy who got about the thing with Desiree, and he also signed Oasis and a bunch of other people. So we had built up this friendship and relationship. And when Farm Club ended, he and I were talking about me going to work at Epic to do A&R. This is before Farm Club, you know what I mean? And Polly Anthony at the time was looking for, it was boy bands were really big. So she was looking for somebody who would be more into signing boy bands. She said, what band would you like to have on this label? I go, Foo Fighters. She wants somebody who's going to say NSYNC or Backstreet Boys, right? So it was, David was like, Matt, just give me a few months. But then I got the job offer from Jimmy to move out to California. But I still wanted to do A&R. And it turned out that Donnie Einer, I was still on, by the way, this whole time, guys, I'm still on K-Rock in New York. So I'm working for Steve Kingston.
You were still in K-Rock when you were doing all the Farm Club stuff?
Oh, yeah. I was doing it from, Kevin Weatherly was nice enough to let me use their studios. And Steve Kingston was on the East Coast.
Sure.
Kingston didn't want me to stop doing the show. He's like, you can keep doing the show. We had the show called The Buzz. It was my new music night show on Sundays.
Okay.
And we had performances on there, and then we would play everything new. And Steve wanted me to do it. So I would just kind of pretend I was in New York that Sunday night. And then of course the next night you're on TV in California, right. But it could happen. But so I started in 96 on K-Rock doing the Sunday night show, which I did for, 96, let me see, 11, 12 years.
Good run.
11 years I did K-Rock in New York. And I love doing it, and sometimes I do fill-ins too. But when Kevin was overlooking it before Steve Kingston could leave Z100 because of his contract there to come over, Kevin originally asked me if I could do 5 days a week, but because I was doing M2 and MTV, I couldn't commit to a 5-day-a-week show.
And you're still in the music department.
Yeah, and I'm still doing that. So I would have loved to have done it, and it was really kind of Kevin to, ask, and Steve, they wanted that. But so we decided to do the Sunday night. And I remember, I'll never forget Steve Kingston going to me, Matt, he goes, I want you to do your thing Sunday nights. He goes, I'll put you on a long leash. He goes, I'll let you do what you want to do. He was, he was really cool, man. And then,
I never got to work with him, but I've heard great things.
Oh, I love Steve Kingston, Yeah. I mean, Kevin's great too. These guys are all, I respect so many radio programmers out there.
I do too.
I know, and it's, you had Rick Cummings on here. I worked for Rick, through Emmis, on RXP, and love Rick. I mean,
he's the best.
I've met some of the most amazing radio people. I just respect radio people so much, and people that love radio, because that's me. I'm a radio lover for the rest of my life. I never want to stop. I don't want to ever retire.
I'm with you too. I love what I do. I mean, I sometimes complain about it, but I still feel so incredibly blessed to do what we do for a living.
I am so grateful every day.
Let's talk though really quick. How do you end up? So you're back at Columbia in New York, and then from there, and I want to kind of go through your career here really quickly. You go to VH1, right? Yeah. Well, it was crazy because all at the same time. I was there. Yeah, I went to VH1 to do. They did a new top 20 countdown that they basically rebranded around me, which was really cool. That I did for a while. Okay. That was about a year. But I remember the craziest thing about all that was I was also working for Mark Cuban. So I was doing a show called Sound Off with Matt Pinfield on HDNet, and it was me and a producer, and we basically, and this guy Evan Heyman, who was the head of like programming there for Mark. Great guy, I'm still great friends with. And it was this producer, Dominic Carter, and he and I
we'd all do the bookings ourselves. You know, I got Max Weinberg or somebody, you know, like
That's
I'd
cool.
call him up, or Little Steven, you know, going back to the Springsteen thing. But we were getting different people in, and they would get people. And if Mark Cuban really liked an artist and he wanted him on, we'd have him on. And, you know,
What's Mark Cuban like to work for?
he was great to work for, man. He was really hands off. I mean, if he likes what's going on, he's happy. You know, I mean, that's what it's like with him. And even though he just sold Access TV, I'm still doing this show for them, which I'm shooting tomorrow. It's called A Year in Music. So I'm doing 2 great years of music, especially in rock and roll, 1971 and 1991.
Oh, great years.
But I did 66 and 75 the first season.
Oh, that's cool. We'll have to check that out. We'll put a link to that on the notes as well.
Yeah, so that when that airs.
So many projects. So you start mornings now. Let's go into XRP really quick.
RXP. You mean,
RXP,
yeah.
sorry.
So RXP is an MS station, and it was a great opportunity. I remember Brian Schock was there, who has done radio all over the place, and Brian was like, I met with him. I remember I was telling some radio guys, I go, have that guy call me back. What's up? You know? And he calls me back. We talk on the phone for 3 hours one night. Talk about music, radio, life. And he goes, man, I love watching your interviews on Sound Off. He goes, I've watched them all. He goes, but I didn't know if you were going to be like this MTV dick who had like entitlement and thought like you were cooler than everybody else. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like the most low key. I mean, I never walk into a room with an attitude that I'm better than anybody else. I am always learning from other people. And I love that. I think that's the one thing that an artist like David Bowie did. He was smart enough to always know there's always more to learn. And you can always improve what you're doing. And I've learned from great people in radio in this country. You know what I mean?
How long were you at RXP?
RXP, we did it for 3 years. And then after the 3rd year, they sold it. There were rumors everywhere. How I found out was pretty crazy, though. I'm in an airport with my girlfriend going to introduce my girlfriend at the time to my mother in Florida. And we're like going through negotiating. There's no problems, like getting things ready for year 4. And all of a sudden I get an email. Thank you so much for your services. We love you, but we will not be a requirement anymore. I'm like, what the fuck happened? And it's nothing worse than you're in an airport and you're like with your girlfriend. Like you're thinking it's gonna be a good trip, and you gotta go down and tell your mom, oh my God, I just lost this job. I mean, and everybody in radio's lost a job somewhere.
Sure.
We all have.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way it is. Like the famous line that maybe Brian Schock said to me or somebody, they go, there's 2 kinds of people in radio. People that have lost a job and people that are about to. Which I thought was really funny. But
so how does we finally meet in 2012?
Yeah.
And Flashback. Well, we've met earlier at Farm.
Well, it was right after. Here's the good news. It happened that I ended up doing Flashback because word, it was out in like All Access and all the other, radio tip sheets and everything that were still online in newsletters, that we were all out of work. Me, Leslie Fram, Steve Craig.
Becky Bennett was there, correct?
Yeah.
From
a bunch of
at Westwood, yeah.
Yeah, so it was one of those situations. And we were, I got a call from Mike McVeigh. He was a great guy. I love Mike. And Mike is such a really brilliant guy and became a great friend after this. Just called me up and said, hey, Matt, I might have something for you. He goes, you should be working. And which was the most amazing. And it was Flashback. And that was the how it all started. And it was great. So we've been doing it for 9 years. We're about to celebrate our 9-year anniversary. I still have time to do more radio. I love it. I love doing what I do.
You look absolutely incredible. You wrote a book a couple years back called All These Things That I've Done: My Insane, Improbable Rock Life.
Yeah, and the rest of the title, that was their idea for the rest of the title. All These Things That I've Done is a song by the band The Killers that actually Brandon Flowers wrote the night that he met me. And that goes back to my A&R days because I was trying to sign The Killers.
Really?
I flew from what the line in the song, I got soul, but I'm not a soldier, comes from is I had gotten a letter, an email from the U.S. Army saying, you got a lot of fans in the soldiers. They go, we have returning soldiers from Iraq and Afghanistan that watched you on MTV that are fans, and we would like to know if you would come mentor some of our wounded soldiers and our musician soldiers that are returning. And I said, of course. I mean, I responded right away and told them, of course I do that. So they flew me to Colorado City, Colorado, and I was there for 3 days with the soldiers, and it was a pretty incredible experience, pretty humbling experience. And then I flew right to Las Vegas to try and sign The Killers. So their manager and their lawyer. Their lawyer, of course, is now their manager, Robert Reynolds. His brother is the singer Dan Reynolds of Imagine Dragons. His other brother, Mac, is the manager of Imagine Dragons. It's like the Vegas Mafia. So it's Killers and Imagine Dragons are related in that way.
Yeah, okay.
And then you got Panic at the Disco. You got all that stuff in Vegas, right? I just went down there and talked about like the history of music in Vegas at this for the governor's global global tourism summit, which was very cool with Andy Schuon. But getting back to that, I went there. They picked me up. I watched the band rehearse in their drummer's parents' garage, and they already had Mr. Brightside, that big hit. They already had written "Smile Like You Mean It." I really wanted to sign up. We had dinner that night, and then I needed to ride back to my hotel. And Brandon Flowers, the singer of the band, said, "I'll give you a ride." And he was still a bellhop, all right? But they were looking for a record deal. They were turned down by almost every label, and it was only me and Rob Stevenson at Island Def Jam that wanted really to sign them. So it was he and I neck and neck at the end. But Leor Cohen went at it really hard. He's a very smart guy. Started in Island Def Jam, of course, too, with Rick Rubin and with those guys and Russell Simmons. So he knew that he better move fast. So he offered him a contract, and I got a call the next day. They were going to come in to meet with Donnie Ienner and Will Botwin the next day, and they were like, "Matt, we had some bad news for you. We had to sign." But the good news was that night, Brandon Flowers drives me back to my hotel. I'm staying at the Hilton in Las Vegas. He's got an old AMC car, and he's got 2 cassette tapes, not even a CD player, okay? And this is in the 2000s. Beatles Help, Beatles 62, 66. And we both had a couple cocktails, and he goes, what do you want to hear? I'm like, let's listen to Help. So he and I are driving down the strip. We're singing the top of our lungs, Help, the night before. You got to hide your love away.
By the way, I'd love to be a fly on the wall watching you try to pitch the Killers to sign with the label.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they were definitely up for it, but it was one of those situations where it was going to be one or the other. But we get to the Las Vegas Hilton, and we're sitting at a bar there. We're the only 2 people there, me and Brandon Flowers. And he and his brother had been big fans of mine in 120 Minutes. So we started talking, and I told him the story about the thing with the soldiers, and I told him the story about like how I was looked like I was going to go through a divorce. So I just told my life. He goes home that night and writes that song, All These Things That I've Done. And that's where the line, I got sold, but I'm not a soldier, comes from. And there's also some other lines in there that refer to my midlife.
Inspired by your story.
Yeah, it was. And he's,
are you guys still in touch?
Oh, yeah, big time. In fact, I went to see them after I almost got killed last year. In 2 weeks, it'll be... Yeah, I was... you can get to that. Yeah. But I'll just say that they dedicated the song to me at the Forum.
Oh, my God.
They played the iHeart Alter Ego show, and they dedicated the song to me that night. Because it's a pretty, so there was some big... Yeah.
You brought it up.
Yeah.
Let's tell the story. You had a very serious accident. I find out about it because I think someone from TMZ calls you here at the office wanting to get a statement.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my God, what has happened?
Yeah. Well, what happened was I was getting coffee across the street from where my apartment building is in Hollywood. And I was crossing the street, and I was looking both ways, and it was clear. And all of a sudden, I'm looking this way, and I'm almost across the 3rd lane, and I turn to the right, and I see a car gunning at me. All I could think to do was to jump up, like I'm jumping out of the way. And I jumped up. My right leg was broken in half, compound fracture, bone coming out. I went up through the windshield with my head, tore my head wide open, and tore part of my ear off, my bottom right ear. And then she hit the brakes. I spun off the hood of the car, and I flew another 15 feet and landed on my head and my back. And what a miracle that I didn't have brain damage, and I wasn't paralysis. I was so very, very lucky.
Do you remember any of this?
Yes, I don't remember my head going through the windshield, but I remember jumping up. I remember spinning off the hood of the car because you could smell the hot metal from the engine.
Oh, my God. And
then I landed on the ground, and I was in a kind of an adrenaline shock. At one point, I even thought about picking myself up off the ground, and looked at my leg. It was like, in half. And I'm like, I guess I'm not getting up. Took them 9 minutes to get there with the EMS. They couldn't, they had to put me on a tarp and move me into the EMS ambulance for the fire department. And they cut all my clothes off me, and they put my arm in there with morphine just to kill the pain. And they asked me, can you feel your toes? And I just tried to move my head. Yeah, I can feel my toes. And they looked at me and said, you are an absolute miracle. They go, you should be dead. They go, most people would not have survived what you just went through. Isn't that amazing?
Unbelievable.
So I went to the hospital, to Cedar-Sinai. Thank God they took me to a great hospital. turned out the surgeon that was in there was a fan. Like, he was a guy who loved rock and roll. So he was like, I heard another guy say, "You going to use staples?" And he goes, No, I like this guy. I'm going to sew him up. I watched him on TV. Thank God, Ryder. I look like Frankenstein. Because at least now I only look like a pirate, right? He did a good job.
Gives you some character.
You know?
Matt's got a scar across his forehead, kind of on the...
and they sewed behind the ear. They sewed the ear back on, too, which was pretty cool.
But thank God you are alive.
I'm very grateful. I thank God every day.
I'm obviously, well aware of the story because we work together almost every single week. But it was amazing. You were out for maybe a month, but you came back and have been in every week. Started with a walker.
Yeah, remember I came here I literally, the day I got released from the second hospital, I came right here to work.
It was unbelievable.
On a walker. Yeah. And man, that was some painful stuff.
And then
painful shit, if you want to call it.
And
the cane was after that.
Yeah. And then you've been now able to walk on your own. But
it's a pretty miraculous recovery. I worked very, very hard on physical therapy, and I would not feel sorry for myself at all. I actually felt grateful to be alive and appreciated life more every day. And I was out at shows all the time, like whether it was the Roxy or the Troubadour. Everybody in town knew that I'd gotten hit, so they were like, make sure they let me walk in the back or I have a seat for me. The Forum, I'd be in a wheelchair at the Forum for the Chris Cornell tribute night or the Alt Ego iHeart show. I mean, I was at I never stopped going out, and I never stopped going to physical therapy. I was so motivated. I knew I was going to walk again, and that was important.
Do you think a characteristic that you have, the word comes to me, tenacity, and you are tenacious. You left messages every month for Tom Freston.
That was actually for Andy Schuon.
Andy Schuon, sorry.
But ended up being, working for all of them.
You get up, many people, I think, going through your life, your addiction, your issues would give up, but you do not give up.
Never. No, and that was the thing, and I suffered, obviously, from years and years of fighting addiction. And, once you're a recovering alcoholic, I mean, you're always one. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean you're going to drink, but, you always have to remember, some people, they don't use the word recovered because, it can creep up on you at any time. I mean, you have a daily reprieve and you have to really work at it like you have to work at everything else. And so, it's just one of those things you have to work hard and you have to just keep everything in perspective. That's why people, a lot of people, there's a program, I can't really go into mentioning what it is or talk about it, but I will just say that, I've been a part of it on and off for years, and at this point I've been on for a while. So I'm doing really good, and I'm just...
You look the best, candidly, you've ever looked. I think the scar makes you look like a badass.
Thank you. I lost a ton of weight, right?
You sound amazing. You are thinner. How much weight have you lost?
My guess is 30 pounds, maybe 35.
I'm going to go with even, I don't know, but I'd go with even more. I'm not sure.
Like 40, 45. Yeah, maybe. I lost so much from exercise. As soon as I could get used to my leg again, I hit that stationary bike and I hit it every day. And then as soon as I built up the muscle and the strength and the cartilage, everything around my right leg, I started doing the treadmill. Now, I'll never be able to run on a treadmill, but the one thing that I would give people advice, because they see the difference of how different I look, I said, you get on that treadmill, you don't have to run, but walk and make sure you do it on an incline. So I would do it between straight up 15 degrees and then down to 10 and then back up to 15. And believe me, it's like walking up hills. It's hard.
I know you were doing this before the accident.
Yeah.
You were already trying to go this transformation with your body.
Yeah.
What was the catalyst for that? It wasn't the accident.
For that, I was in a relationship I was very unhappy in, and I knew I just wanted to change things. At the time I was like, you know what? I want to be a strong, sober individual, and I don't only want it to be me knowing that I am in good mental and mental shape, but I wanted physically to you be able to see a change. So I was doing a thing with a neighbor 20 years younger than me, climbing the Hollywood stairs, 180 up, 180 down. These ones off of Beechwood, and he got me the first time. I did it twice. By the time he worked me so hard, like a trainer, but as a friend, that by the time right before I got hit by that car, I was going up and down those stairs. That's 360 stairs, 10 times in an hour and a half.
Unbelievable.
And I was stopping
Do you think that has something to do, if you weren't in that good of shape, the car accident could have killed you?
I think it has everything to do with why other parts of my body I wasn't as fragile. Had I not been working so hard at that, I think for some reason it's just like, I mean, I've been told that. Actually, I've been told that by the people. When I got to the second hospital, because they transferred me from Cedars-Sinai to a place in Century City called the California Rehabilitation Institute, where you're in the hospital, but you're doing physical therapy every day. So it's painful, but you're hopping down that hallway to get into that room and to do that physical therapy. And they did tell me that they do believe that that's the reason why I didn't end up in worse shape, because my legs were strong, my stamina was strong from doing that, and I was, and then, some other people had said to me, they go, you know what, man, I might have gotten really bummed out and depressed if I oddly enough, I didn't. I mean, I was more unhappy about a relationship that I wasn't happy in. You know what I mean? Yeah. But as far as the injury, I was like, I'm going to overcome this. That's the most important thing for me. I'm going to overcome this. I want to walk again like a normal person, and I'm not going to give up, and I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. And it's they kept, when you get hit by a car like that, they send in a shrink, a psychiatrist to see you every other day and ask you if you're feeling suicidal, if you are feeling depressed. They want to know, like, they literally check your mental state, and they tell you, you may have a breakdown eventually. This may all come pouring out.
Almost like a PTSD.
Yeah. But amazing. I mean, I would say I definitely got some trauma and PTSD from it, but I try to look at it as a gift that I'm still here.
Amazing.
There's got to be a reason, right?
Yeah. Amazing attitude and just incredible outlook. I am honored to be your friend.
No, I'm honored to be your friend. I love working with you. We've been doing it right now. We're going on our 9-year celebration.
I can't believe
Wait till we
it.
hit 10.
And Bill Royal, who's a fantastic writer, has been on the show for almost. Kevin,
Yeah.
you've been producing
Kevin
the
Horton?
show, I think, from day one. Just an incredible production.
Yeah.
How many affiliates are we on with it, Kev?
Like 100. Is it anywhere between 150, 190?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost 150, 190 radio stations, and we're on the American Forces Network.
Right. That's
so
right.
We're on
And
around
if
the
you're
world.
interested in being an affiliate, reach out to us here at Benstown. And would you be cool if we gave away a few copies of your book?
Oh, of course I would.
Yeah,
I'd be glad to.
How about like the first 5 people to reach out to us here at Benstown, ask for a copy?
Yeah, we'll send them hardcover copies of the book.
Have you sign them?
Yeah, I would love to. I'd be glad to.
Let's do that.
I was so grateful Clive Davis endorsed the book, and I had some really great people like Anthony Bozo, who's written books on.
Anyone I meant to ask you this earlier. Have you ever been starstruck?
Yes, I will tell you a story about Paul McCartney. Now, I've interviewed Paul McCartney, and we've had such great conversations. I was out to dinner with a couple radio legends one night before Paul McCartney was having this event. Before I moved to California the first time for Farm Club, there was an event happening on Buddy Holly's birthday that Paul McCartney was throwing him a birthday party at Roseland. So it was an invite only. It was closed down. So I was out with some Scott Shannon and Steve Kingston.
Oh man,
I was having dinner with two guys.
What a crew!
2 guys that I love, and they just I love talking records with Scott Shannon. He and Steve are just brilliant guys. I love them. So we're out there, we're talking, and we go to the event. Okay, and I'm moving in about a week to the West Coast. And I remember being a little afraid to meet Paul because I saw some other guy was going to try and talk to him, but Paul walked by him. But I think Paul has this radar. When he knows someone's really uncomfortable, it's going to be an uncomfortable thing. Paul waits until you have the confidence to come up and actually really talk to him.
Okay.
So you kind of walk by this guy. So Bill Flanagan, who's a writer who's written some incredible books, used to be editor of Musician magazine. He's there. And he goes, Matt, did you go up and say hi to Paul? I go, no, man, I don't know. I just saw him shine some guy. I don't know. He goes, no. And he goes, Paul knows who you are, man. You should go talk to him. He's a really great guy. That night was amazing. I met Buddy Holly's widow, Maria Elena. Dion was there. Smithereens played. A bunch of people. The original the Crickets played with Sonny Curtis, who wrote I Fought the Law. It was an incredible night. Paul got up and did some Buddy Holly songs.
Oh, my God.
It was so awesome.
Cool.
But I walk up to Paul, and I'll never forget it. I start talking to him, and I go, Paul, hey, we just start talking. Talking about some of his collaborations and working with Elvis Costello, and because I love Elvis, and we were talking about that. And when he worked with him and Eric Stewart from 10cc, we're just wrapping up some of his collaborations. And I was compelled to say something I always wanted to say to Paul, because people were always trying to diss Paul and talk shit, about him with Wings. And I don't, what are they talking about? Ram and Band on the Run are two incredible albums.
For sure.
I mean, Paul, but what I said to Paul was what I've always believed. I said, you know what, Paul? There have been a lot of critics that have talked a lot of shit, but I want you to know that any guy who can write songs as beautiful as Yesterday and Here, There, and Everywhere and as metal and punk as Helter Skelter and I'm Down, fuck them. Nobody's got anything on you. And you know, he looks at me and goes, hey, he goes, you coming to my party next week? I'm like, yeah. Of course I was moving, so I didn't want to say, no, Paul, I'm not. I wanted the conversation to end very positively. So I said that. Well, of course, we ended up meeting each other again a couple of times. And then when his album New came out a few years ago, I was on the Board of Governors of the Grammys. I was elected to the Board of Governors, New York chapter of the Recording Academy. And we were in the same building as NPR, the old offices for the Grammys. And they knew that. And he was only doing 2 interviews that day. He was doing Stern. And then he was going to do this radio special with me, right? Which was great. So one of the great things we always talked about was earlier on, I told him how my oldest daughter, Jessica, how the Beatles was the thing I introduced her to first. And then I said to him, when we meet up there, we're having lunch there, and then we're getting ready to do this interview at NPR studios, even though it's going to be used really for Cumulus and for other radio stations that want to take that special interview. So I said to him, I go, Paul, it's funny, I had another daughter since last right after the last time we saw each other. And of course, the first thing I turn her on to is your songs, your music, Beatles, and solo. And the engineer turns around and looks at Paul and goes, you ever get tired of hearing that? And Paul looks at him and just, matter of fact, goes, no, I never get tired of hearing that. Paul shut him down,
Good
man.
for him, man.
Paul shut him down for me, which was so cool. And then, afterwards at the end, I have this audio still on the raw interview. Paul goes to me, Matt, if it wasn't my wedding anniversary to Nancy, you and I go down to the pub and talk more about rock and roll, which was the most unbelievable thing to me because, it's Paul McCartney. And, I'm friends with Ringo because I see him all the time here in Los Angeles.
I got to see him play with Paul at Dodger Stadium a few months ago. That was amazing. That must have been
unbelievable, yeah.
Do you think that, I know some people bag on Ringo, and obviously...
I love Ringo. I don't care what anybody says.
Let's just talk about his drumming. He's
a great drummer.
He is a great drummer.
Hey, listen, anybody who could create a skip beat like they do on Ticket to Ride, it's not like somebody told him. That is a very unique drum beat. And then having to create drums for things that are as unique sounding as Strawberry Fields Forever. You got to think about it. He can play straight, but he can also play a bunch of other different things. I mean, I think he's a great drummer. I mean, he's, you know what I mean? And a lot of people picked up drumsticks and bought drum sets because of Ringo.
Excellent point.
You know?
You never fail to surprise me. Ringo Starr and you hanging out. I want to go
me and a whole group of guys with Ringo.
All right, that's still cool.
But he's the best. Yeah, he's been so amazingly supportive.
Oh man. Well, Matt, congratulations on obviously just the transformation of yourself. You look fantastic.
Thank you, Chachi.
Sound amazing.
I'm grateful to be here, man. I love radio. I hope I'm able to work in it for the rest of my life. I love we talk about radio. We're both guys. We're lifers. I love this. I never get tired ever of radio. Listening to it, hearing talented people, going back and listening to the classic broadcasts from Casey Kasem or the guys Dan Ingram on ABC. I just love music more than anything in the world, and radio. So there you go.
I'm right there with you.
You know?
Thanks for coming in, buddy. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chachi. It was great being here.